All right. Thank you all for attending, and hopefully we can keep it tight. And then I'd like to call this meeting to order Tuesday, February 20th, 2024, Active Transportation Committee meeting. Firstly, our land acknowledgement. We acknowledge with respect that we are meeting on the traditional territory of the Lekwungen speaking people and are honored to have the opportunity to build strong working relationships with the people of the Songhees, some nations. I probably messed that up. Anyone, so public participation, anyone online? I don't see anyone, Amanda. And sorry. Perfect. Approval of the agenda. Thank you. Oh, there we go. I'd like to ask for approval of the agenda from the February 5th, 2024 meeting. If I can get a mover for that, please. Sorry, this is going to be the previous agenda, approval of the previous agenda. Thank you, Mr. Lacey. Are we backwards? Thank you. So I see February 20th, 2024, so February 5th, 2020. So what's the corrected date of? Okay, let's back up just a minute and we'll go with adoption of the agenda as presented tonight, February 20th, 2024. There's no previous minutes, is that right? Thank you. So mover for adoption of the agenda is presented. Thank you, Mr. Lacey. Anyone opposed? Thank you. And then adoption of minutes from October 16th, 2023. Now I see it's very small. Mover for those previous minutes, please. Thank you, Mr. Lacey, twice. Anyone opposed? Carried. Thank you. Public participation now. Jeez, it's out of order. Sorry, Amanda. And nobody online, nobody in the gallery other than staff members. Any staff members that are residents that want to speak up? Thank you. New business 5.1, calling on Tyler Pettepiece. And your bag of tricks there, eh? Nice. Hit your button. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for coming tonight. So tonight we're here to talk about the buffered to protected bike lane conversion program. Yeah, just want to say thank you very much for coming, and got about 19 slides prepared tonight, but it is meant to be sort of conversational. So at any point in time, please feel free to interrupt me to say something. I don't have a clip. There we go. Okay. So to provide a bit of background on the buffered protected bike lanes, this item is identified in our financial plan. Starting off in 2023, we had about 79,000 allocated for a budget. And that came from these strategic objectives. So first one is economy. That is establishing Colwood's commercial value proposition and deepening our regional partnerships. And that's through shifting to sustainable behaviors. And that leads us into the infrastructure strategic objective, which aligns with our transportation master plan update. And then, of course, environmental goals. So this is to adopt or encourage mode shift for Colwood residents in making more comfortable cycling infrastructure. It also aligns with the OCP, improving the safety, comfort, convenience, and enjoyment of cycling for both recreational and destination-oriented trips. And I should also mention it also aligns with our active transportation network plan, which we now have a draft version. So in 2023, we started off with a pilot project, and this was to understand the costs that are involved, productivities, which is very important for planning the future program. And the location that was chosen was on Painter Road. This is in proximity to Dunsmuir Middle School. It's in proximity to parks and connection of our major roads such as Machosen to the Royal Bay area through the Painter Trail. In 2023, in the fall, we installed 127 concrete barrier curbs, rebar pins, and traffic delineator posts. And that's the same traffic delineator posts that we use throughout the municipality. It took over the course of 2 days. We planned it to be outside of peak drop-off and pickup times. The engineering team provided layout for the curbs. We brought in SureSpan Structures, which was a recommendation, or at least is a company that other municipalities are using for precast structures and had a competitive rate for supply. And our public works crews installed the curbs, provided traffic control, and installed the rebar and posts. So this is a finished product. If you haven't already seen it on Painter Road, we also put up signage for public to provide feedback on our Let's Talk Colwood page. And this is a snapshot of the Let's Talk Colwood page where we asked for feedback on the community's input for whether they were in favor, and also provided an opportunity to provide written responses. So for the feedback, 68% were strongly in favor, and 25% strongly opposed, and then somewhat opposed, 6%. We had about 47 written responses with this as well. Didn't want to show you 47 paragraphs of people responses. So instead I did one of these. I uploaded it to software that pulled off common phrases to try and give a snapshot of what people had to say about the program. Overall, we had about 26 mentions of people feeling safe. So feeling much safer using the bike lanes. We're happy about the implementation and please do more. So that was a positive that came from it. But there is also some important things to consider, which is impact to emergency vehicles. So there is concern that this takes away the shoulder where people can pull off to allow emergency vehicles to come past. So that's where you kind of have to go looking for the parking scallops, the driveways to get out of the way of emergency vehicles. Street parking is another one. A lot of people are concerned about street parking. With this implementation, it was on Painter in a location where parking was already not permitted in the school zone. But that is something to think about going forward. Drivers do feel more restricted. You can see dangerous for drivers there. So it does make drivers feel more cautious and using roadways more restriction from the hard buffer that's now restricting the laneway. And then access to properties. So that's a big one where people have access to their properties through their driveways, of course, but also this does remove access to their backyards. So the painted lane is where a driver could go over a painted lane and access their backyard if they needed to clean up leaves or do other maintenance, but this takes away that access. Okay, so discuss the formalized bike lanes in Colwood. This is a snapshot of all of Colwood's bike lanes, ranging from buffered to protected to painted. Going further, so this is the potential conversion areas. So these are all the spots where we have painted bike lanes, painted buffered bike lanes. Between the time of publishing these slides and further analysis actually showed we could, in spots where we have maybe just a standard paint line at 1.8, we could actually implement, although we don't have a buffer, we could put in a protected curb on that paint line or on the inside of it and still have a 1.5 bike lane. So there is a bit more areas where we can implement these curbs other than what's shown here. And I'll talk about it in a potential area once it's chosen. We do have a lot of areas to contemplate. How do we prioritize? we started by doing that with showing the different priorities among the communities. So things like parks, school zones, neighborhood centers, and areas where you see increase in growth, increase of development, and mode shift from to active transportation. And all of that information feeds into our prioritization matrix. Kind of a tough slide to read, but this is just a snapshot on the prioritization matrix, which we're continuously updating, developing, and it's a great opportunity to receive some feedback on some other priorities that you guys think might be good to use when contemplating projects. Things like collisions on a road, parks and the proximity to those. I won't go through all these individually, but this is one of the big things that how we factored into prioritizing a future project. So that's the showing. So as you can see, Souk Road needs it the most. Unfortunately, we don't have a good connections on Souk Road. We have these pockets of buffered bike lanes where it's hard to make that continuous connection. Machosen Road, Goldstream Island Highway, Latoria Boulevard, all second-hand prioritization areas, which leads us into contemplated conversion areas. So the areas we're thinking, here's one on Machosen. So this is just as you're turning off of Souk Road, coming onto Machosen. There's a bus stop just before this, where this picture is taken. But you can see there's a painted buffer on the right-hand side. And on the left-hand side, that's actually one of the spots where we actually have a 2-meter asphalt shoulder. So that's where we could, although we don't have buffered paint lines, we could implement a protected curb there as well. This is another area, so Machosen Road and Lagoon. This is the recommended one, the top priority one right now for the program this year. So for this year, we would realize the intersection of Lagoon and Machosen going south until about you get just past Hatley on either side. So this would be in the painted, buffered. This is a great location because it's in the neighborhood center. It's also next to the 2 schools there, and where you can hopefully realize the most value in mode shift. But some other areas to discuss, which are Latoria Boulevard. As you can see, just the 2 buffered bike lanes there on the top left picture, real life picture. And then the bottom right. So this is an interesting spot where you have the roundabouts at Latoria and VMP. And then as you exit the roundabout onto Latoria Road, there's a buffered bike lane. And you can see a section of roadway where you're on this buffered bike lane and then you hit these parking scallops. So buffered bike lane goes away. The bicycles share the road with drivers, and then it goes once the parking scallops are gone, it goes back into a buffered bike lane. So this might be a good way to get connectivity on Latoria Road, where you can realize a continuous route from the roundabout to Wishart, and also provide protected bike lanes. This is only a recommendation given the increase or that we could see with the Triangle Lands development. It is a future scenario, but a spot where we have 1.8 bike lanes and can implement concrete curbs. And that was it. Lots of verbal talking at you guys, so please.
Thank you, Tyler. Let's bring it back to committee. Look, first off, what is it you need from us as far as decision points on this? If you can just help us.
Of course,
guide our discussion here.
Great question. So we made a commitment to council that this is an annual recurring program And it's a great opportunity to bring this to our active transportation committee to get feedback. So this has sort of been a presentation to outline our philosophy in this program going forward, and getting any sort of input. You know, if there's things that you don't like, decisions that we're making, things that you're like, okay, I kind of agree with how you're doing this. It's really here to just discuss on what your thoughts are. Yeah.
So some feedback from the committee in the form of where we should focus our finite amount of dollars as far as priorities. That kind of thing would be helpful for staff. Is that right?
Yep.
Thank you. Colin, are you ready? There you go.
Thank you. Thank you for taking the time and effort to be putting like the snapshot is a good point to be seeing like where Colwood is at for its planning and whatnot. But there's a few like missed opportunities and errors on it I've noticed when taking a glance at it. The Quarry Street Producers Way, that like interior area of Rural Bay, is all like protected bike lanes next to the sidewalk. On the map, it's showing not existing and at times just buffered. So I'm curious to know what happened there, and also the multi-use pathway that continues down Rogers Halberger Way, like why that's like not included in the sections that have been built. I understand there's a section that's not yet built, but still there's other areas where it connects up to closer to Dunsmuir Middle School. It's a big gap there when that's been built out a few years ago. So just wondering why there's like these missing blank spots when those actually areas have been built, and why some areas are like misrepresenting what's actually been put in there. And I'm also curious to know what the thought process was on why Colwood was building a lot of these buffered bike lanes compared to just going straight to the protected ones, and now having to redo that stuff when it could have been put onto the, say, like developers that are building that stuff out with the developments in the past. Thank you.
Yeah, no, those are all great questions. So for the buffered parts, that is a miss in the previous long time ago when the Painter Road would have been implemented. So this is sort of trying to encourage the mode shift. It wasn't contemplated previously, and now is something that we're trying to encourage with the evolving strategic objectives and objectives of the OCP, and changing priorities to encourage mode shift. So it wasn't originally built, the infrastructure, and how can we make it better now, essentially. And then as for the areas you mentioned, that honestly just comes from updating our GIS system and our as-builts, and when we receive those from developers, it will happen. It's just it's part of our updates for of our systems.
Thanks, Tyler. That was great to see. I use Painter quite a bit with my kids to come down to Royal Bay. It was good to see your comments. You said that drivers felt restricted and cautious when using the roadway now, which is great. So it sounds like the concrete barriers of doing their job, right? Also, there wasn't a whole lot of response. So hopefully that means that it's just another part of growing the city and growing a safer network. There was only a dozen people that strongly objected, so that was encouraging. You also mentioned that you're interested in some feedback about like where to prioritize. I just wanted to comment and say that regardless of the mode we're using for driving or walking or biking, people want the main direct route. So Matrosen Road, Sook Road, Latoria, Wishart's another one. So, but it's great. I'm glad to see that pilot going in. So one question, you did mention Matrosen Road at Lagoon. So that's a big one for me. I see like at Sangster School there, both sides of the road, the bike lane ends before the school, where parents and kids need the bike lane the most. And I think that the right of way is actually being used for parking right in front of the school, and the fence, like there's not much of a sidewalk even there right in front of the school. And on the west side of Machosen, like across the road from the school, where the bike lane just ends. You know, that's obviously being used for drop off and pickup time, but most of the day that available parking on the shoulder is empty. So I just wondered if that's in the scope. The fact that the bike lane ends at Royal Bay Bakery and then doesn't start for quite a few. Well, actually, I don't think it starts until you're across Wishart heading towards Sook Road. And then the other way, if you come up from Painter and turn right to go past the school, there's no bike lane until you're actually up to Royal Bay Bakery on the other side as well. So that's a huge deal for the kids going to school there and the parents that might be riding with them or walking with them. And just one other comment, sorry, on Painter. I just wondered why continuous treatment sidewalks weren't considered for some of those minor side streets. You know, how you've got a curb cut coming down to road level and then a pedestrian crossing for the kids walking to school. That would have helped slow the drivers down and made them more aware that there was a pedestrian space. I just wondered if that was a consideration when that work was done.
Although I'm the capital leads now, I wasn't then, so it's tough for me to answer that one.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I apologize, but that is a great point and something that we are thinking about for future projects is those raised crosswalks where you get the one hand slowing down of vehicles, but also visibility of pedestrians. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Good. All right.
And then as for the Machosen Road in front of the school, I believe there's a corridor study going on. I'm seeing some nodding heads. I'm not too familiar with it, nodding heads.
Okay.
That might go to resolve some of those issues. That definitely is a bit more of a major upgrade.
Yeah, for sure.
In realizing that, but definitely a great thing to consider going forward. Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, David. So that dovetails into one of my notes, Tyler, and I made a note to myself, the Machosen Road redesign. If we were to embark upon a solution at that intersection, what happens when we do the full redesign from Royal Bay all the way through to Sook Road? I don't want to be doing this twice.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's definitely a balance.
If we tell you we want you to move ahead with the Sangster School surrounding block there, is the design consistent with what's being contemplated for that stretch of roadway? You might not be able to answer, but that is a concern I have. Maybe you can shed
I can shed
light
some light on
or-
that. Yeah, for sure. No, that's a fantastic point in balancing the needs of trying to implement a mode shift, but also considering future infrastructure upgrades. It's tough to nail down exactly what that final cross section will look like without that going to council and having been approved yet. But it is something that we factored in. So in terms of the actual project costs, for example, the last program on Painter Road, of the $34,000 that was total spent for that program, 3,800 was labor, which is 11% of the total cost. So if we do implement this infrastructure, realize this mode shift, we unfortunately don't know when the Machosen Road corridor upgrades will come, but that is the percentage of costs that we would lose in having to move them. And it is something that our crews can do. Forklift pick them up and move them over, but there is some sunk costs along with that. Yeah.
I think I got that. So you're right. It could be a number of years before we embark on that. So if the committee believes that's a serious priority, that we could kind of put a Band-Aid on it for a few years and then come back and do a proper
Proper thing.
Thank you. Sorry. Go ahead, Angus. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. I have a number of things that I would like to talk to you about. Probably the first one, and it doesn't really have to do with you, but it might be with some of these gentlemen behind us. As you get to Sangster, there's a sign there that tells you if you're speeding or not, right? And when you're not speeding, the face on it goes red. To me, is stop. You're doing something wrong. I just like to see the face turn green when I'm doing the right speed, because almost no one is ever doing the right speed. I mean, I've sat there and watched it. And it's always red. It's red. It's telling you you're over speeding. And if we want to get people down to 30 in that, probably the worst part of Machosen Road, we really need to do that. And we need another one at the other end. The one that's at the top of the hill coming from Royal Bay tells you you're doing 50, but then you have to go down to 30. So you've got one at one end and you don't have one at the other end. So you need two to make it effective. And I think if you're going to put any money out, you need to do that really fast, really quickly, because it's not safe in that area. People don't realize that they need to slow down. And everywhere I've seen those markers being put in really does make a difference. And because it really gets people's attention. I've also seen that I think the job that you did in Painter Road is great, and I'm glad you picked that. What I question about is, what the heck do the kids do when they get to Machosen Road? Yeah. Why is there not something there to get them across the road? All the Machosen Dunsmuir students who go into Royal Roads and spend time in the forest there, which is awesome, have no way of getting across the road there safely. And it's just a mass type of thing that you have to go and, okay, it looks like it's okay now, let's go across. So all that money was spent, but then you can't get across the road. So I think that's another priority that needs to be dealt with seriously there, because there could be a major accident. It could be a large one, especially with the problem of trying to slow down the traffic. So if Painter Road is there for Dunsmuir, Wishart Road is on your map, is the next road that is another major transportation. Is there going to be a connection between those two, so that the elementary school that's there on Wishart, right beside us here, is connected to that route?
On Painter.
On Painter, like from Painter to Wishart, there's a side street. Is there a street that's picked somewhere for people to say, okay, that's how we got our connection? And then when we go down to Machosen, we've got a nice traffic light, and we can go all the way down to Colwood Elementary. Yeah. So we've got a corridor for schools. And at the end of Painter, we can go down into Royal Bay with a nice, beautiful sidewalk that's put in there, bike lane right into Royal Bay. But then how does it connect with the new elementary school that's going to be built in Royal Bay?
Yep.
Right. And one of the other committee members and I walked all through that area, and we realized how the students have to go out around to the front of Royal Bay to get there, where there's all the bike parking is at the back of Royal Bay. They have a nice big shelter back there. So the students have to go out of their way to actually get through there. And there should be a bike lane that goes into the rest of Royal Bay. And now's the time to do it. To go to the second phase of Royal Bay anyway. Now's the time to do it while it's still under construction. But I think that type of idea of getting a corridor that's that ties in all the schools would also get a lot more buy-in from the parents. And they would be able to, could see that their kids are getting to school safely, which is what you really want them to be able to do with this whole idea of blocking all this parking off and stuff. Because parents there's if you look at Sangster, they're so concerned that they're all parking as close as they can to Sangster and walking with their kids, and won't leave them until they got them right to the front door. And I know there might be a study going on there, but I'm not sure what the issue is, because the parents are parking in the bakery, they're parking on the bike lane all the way along there. There's just no parking for that area. So I can always see that part of them is chosen. You've got it down to 30 kilometers, but how is it going to be safe for a kid to want to take his bike and go home? That's my biggest concern. So I'm kind of looking at that. And I also look at the number of people, because I'm one of them that likes to bike around the community. And we have a huge number of bikers coming down from Fort Rod Hill down through the lagoon and then coming up Lagoon Road. And it's a very difficult road to get up. So they're going slow, which is the worst thing as a person in a car, to have a slow biker trying to go up a hill. You know, they're wobbling all over the place. There's a really high sidewalk on the right-hand side as you go up, and it's really tight on that road. So I'd really like to see something happen with that sidewalk to make it more of a friendly biker kind of thing, that so it's not so tough on the people that are biking. Because it's a very difficult road to negotiate on a bike. And I see the kids coming from Sangster coming down the hill, which is awesome, and they've got a safe sidewalk and stuff. But if there's some way of, I don't know how much of road allowance there might be in that area, but I'm really concerned about how that is that's going to happen there. And I think I'd like not to see a lot of money being spent on Souk Road for bike lanes, especially if we're going to put a bridge over the Souk Road for bikes to stay on Galloping Goose, because it's so much safer. I think it's the connections to the Goose that are important, not the connections to Souk Road. And so I'd like to see that become more of it's already there. We don't have to pay for it. I just like to see a lot more connections to something that's already in place, and much safer for people to do that, especially if we're going to spend that amount of money to put a bridge over top of Souk Road. And the amount of people that are riding out from Victoria now is, I don't know, we need a counter like they have down in Victoria, which tells us how many people are coming and which way are they going, what are they doing. Anyway, I'll be quiet now for a minute.
So thank you, Angus, and there's a lot there. So I see Tyler making some notes, and I think what we're looking for is a little bit more of some general direction. And what I took from you is let's prioritize some of the areas around and in between some of our schools and the routes. Is that I know that's a broad general statement, but rather than getting into a specific street and a project and a specific crossing, sorry, go ahead in response. There you go.
Yeah, I think when we're talking about safe transportation routes, we're talking about walking and biking routes. People will buy into it if there is something that it makes sense to them and doesn't cause the traffic to be more cut off or slow down or whatever. And if we look at what Royal Bay is doing to Metchosin Road, it's great to see the roundabout there, but how do we shift all that traffic up the other road and keep them off Metchosin somehow? Because I don't know how we can do that with a 30 zone at a school that right now that's just slowing everything down. So if we don't say, okay, well, we don't want you to travel on that road, we want you to travel on this interior network that we have set up, which I think is what I'm trying to point at, is that there's got to be an alternative. And in Victoria, they picked a couple of streets like Vancouver. It's beautiful. It's amazing. You can ride your bike and not have to worry about anything. And you see people walking that way, and it's great. So if we can stay off some of these major routes, I think that's make a big difference.
You've touched on a lot of points, and I think a lot of that will be coming with the master transportation plan and counters. We have budgeted and are purchased. If they're not purchased, they're imminently purchased and installed.
Yeah, through the chair. They're actually installed and they're, I believe, being linked up with the CRD global map. We have an internal one. We're just doing some checks and balances, making sure they're counting properly, but they were installed late 2023. I think 1 or 2 early this year. There's a few different locations. There's one near the high school in Royal Bay. There's one on Wishart Road by I think it's just on the other side of the street by the school there as well. There's a few. I can actually get a map out to the committee and you guys can have a look at where they've been installed. The numbers are being held. So there's a regional website, the Eco Counter. I don't know if you've seen that website. Okay, so Eco Counter hosts the website for the region and we'll be plugging our data into that, but we're just doing some quality checks to make sure it's counting properly. And we'll get that in there. But I can get a map out.
Sounds great.
Through staff to this committee for locations. And then there's some bigger ones. They're called totems and they have like a Colwood logo and things like that. There's going to be one installed at the Galloping Goose Bridge. There's already a CRD one. Where would that be? Off Whale Road there. There's a little bollard style one. We'll have our own by the bridge. And then potentially another one near the washrooms at Esquimalt Lagoon. But those two will be installed at a later date. The first one I mentioned for the Galloping Goose Bridge will be sooner rather than later. But yeah.
Thanks, Joshua.
And if I may, through the chair again, I think to your point around trying to get potentially some consensus from the committee today with some recommendations, I hear some really great points and good things that we could focus on. But typically this would come from committee to council to make decisions. So I think it helps inform us, know where you guys are at. That could go back to council and then give us clear direction on, do we not consider Souk Road? Do we look at connecting our schools primarily? Do we look at, there's so many different variables here. And I think if we change our criteria and weight those differently, the outcome is totally different. So this feedback is really great, but having consensus from the group would be really helpful.
And so I'm hoping by the end of this, we can come up with a cogent statement and pass a motion that provides some focus to you folks.
That'd be great.
And we'll maybe just stay away from specific routes and stuff like that, just to keep it general.
Yeah, as much as possible. I think the higher level tenets of wanting to get there. See you.
Mr. Chair, just hearing some of the
Welcome,
comments.
Mr. Borhill.
Thank
Yes,
you.
Go ahead.
Just hearing some of the comments about general connectivity and the network. So council did direct us to use the draft active transportation network plan that this committee endorsed as a guide for the purposes of developing the transportation master plan update. So keep in mind, there's maps 4 and 5 in that document that lays out the priority network that does connect the schools and speaks to some of those desire points in the community. So we're still looking at that as a guide moving forward, and invite the committee to keep that document in mind and go back to it if you want to consider improvements and overall comments as to where we're moving. I'll just say that the criteria that was used by staff to prioritize the current retrofitted priority, or excuse me, separated bike lanes, protected bike lanes, was very similar to the priority matrix that was used as the foundational document to the active transportation network plan. So to the previous comments, take a look at that, ask yourselves if that's really meeting the needs of the community. And we would be also potentially looking at amending the draft active transportation network plan as well.
That's a lot of plans. Thank you. And over to Stephen. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to quickly ask some questions about the presentation. On Painter, was it on one side or both sides of the road that you did the buffered lanes or the protected? Okay, both sides. You mentioned, what was the cost? Just
yeah, that was 34,473.
Okay. And I think there was a comment from the public input that just said fall cleanup, winter snow removal. Is that something that you will learn by doing this pilot that will inform you so that when we start putting these everywhere, how to adequately budget for that in the future?
Great question. The conversation was had beforehand, but Tanner.
Thank you for that. From a maintenance perspective, from Public Works, we worked with Tyler before this went in. With our current contractor for street cleaning, Painter Road was one spot that we could still buffer with the drop-in curbs and get in behind to clean because you have access with the driveways. Without our own mechanical equipment for cleaning bike lanes at the moment, our contractor needs 4 feet to get his smaller street sweeper in there to clean in behind, which we have on both sides of the road on Painter in this case. So it is something that we're talking about with engineering. And it's always a focus, where do we put the snow? So this year, depending on how we wrote our operational policy, with what we mentioned in the policy this year, because we are just moving with the mode shift and we don't exactly have all the mechanical equipment we have to take on such tasks other than hand cleaning at the moment. Places, same as Chosen Road, where there is just the painted bike lane, we mentioned that that would be used for snow placement, and the bike lanes would not be cleared in the snow for this year and moving forward until we can kind of get into a position where we can clean them adequately. So that is a constant discussion back and forth with engineering. So it's the same with Painter a moment as for sanitation trucks as well. GFL, goes down Painter Road, has to stop in the lane. So that's a conversation that we have too, what the impact is on traffic and maintenance needs of the city as well. So just while I'm here, I thought I'd just touch on something slight. You are correct with the one counter on Machosen Road. It's an older counter with the defect, and the one as you head towards the bakery, the smiley face will be happy, but it will not turn green. That's a function inside the counter that we cannot fix at the moment. So so there is that one. The one on coming, say, to the school from Royal Bay will change if you're doing under 30.
Yeah.
So, but the other one will not, just the face. There's one right by the bakery, right in front of the bakery. And there is one at the top of the hill too, that just reads speed.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize there was another one there. I just wondered if it's at the beginning of the 30 zone or if it's not.
It's not, no. The 30K starts past the school, closer to Hatley, where that whole stretch will be a playground zone. And the actual counter sits in the boulevard just outside of the bakery. There's a small boulevard just before you get to Lagoon, and there's one there.
So why wouldn't it be at the beginning? What was the rationale behind not putting it at the beginning of the 30 zone?
I can't answer that for you. I'm sorry.
Okay.
And just while I'm here, just to back Joshua up, the eco counter locations, there's one at the end at the Dye Road on the trail before you head into the Goose. And there's 2 on Ryder Hedgedale, one on the south side of Royal Bay, and then on the opposite side of the secondary school. And there's also a bike counter that was put in on Painter Trail as well.
Painter, the trail going into Royal Bay? Okay.
So if you go that way, there was actually a small counter, just a
there,
tubular, and some scoring in the asphalt. So the counter is crisscross, will read both ways.
Okay.
That's the intent of that one.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Lacy.
Thank you. I just want to make a quick comment about the speed display on Machosen. Yeah, I find for myself coming out of Royal Bay, yeah, it's excellent that that flashing speed display. I'll agree with Angus though. I think it'd be much better to be on the playground speed limit, because that entire section of Machosen Road from the Machosen boundary, it's all 50, right? As soon as you enter Colwood from Machosen, say it's 50 all the way through the old gravel pit area. but then you've got a sign at the top of the hill saying 50. You've already been in the 50. So anyway, I just think it would be really effective if it was actually at the playground zone, and same as at the other end, up by the forest beyond Painter. Yeah, anyway, that was it. The flashing speeds catches my attention anyway. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, okay, thank you for answering those questions. So I'm gonna answer, I think you asked for our input on which ones of these could be a good next one to try for replicating what you did on Painter. Notwithstanding actually the excellent comments from the rest of the members of the committee here. I think the lowest hanging fruit, easiest one is the one you showed on Latoria, that is a bike lane, and all of a sudden it becomes a parking lot for cars that I've never seen a car park there ever. So that's probably an easy one to just remove those blocks and put it down. Does it do much to help congestion at some very scary spots to protect kids? No, but it seems like it would be a very, very easy one. I would encourage you guys to consider that one. Like I said, there's no one who ever parks there. It looks like it's a straight ride. And I do think Latoria Road, yeah, when Latoria Boulevard turns into Latoria Road, long-term, that whole thing has to be buffered, protected bike lanes. There's trucks on it. It's going to connect to schools that are in Langford. And then, let's get that whole thing done one time, and let's put the challenge out to Langford for them to fix the rest of the road all the way to Happy Valley. So that's my point there. I'll just add one more comment. I like how you guys put the priorities of the roads here. You use data, you used planning from years ago. So whenever we throw out new suggestions, I'm sure it doesn't make things any easier for you. But the data-driven input about collisions, I think, is a great one to have. I wonder how often near misses are not measured. And I wonder how much I didn't even just go on the road whatsoever because it's too intimidating is never measured. And so the example that I would provide there is Veterans Memorial. So Veterans Memorial, 2 years ago when I first came here, I didn't see anybody walking up and down it or riding their bikes as often as I do now, ever since the Allendale district started coming. And so I wonder whether that's another low-hanging fruit. I know there might be plans in the future to turn that into 4 lanes or 5 lanes. I hope that never happens. I think we should put bike lanes there first, and we should get people riding their bikes out of Royal Bay down that road to the Allendale district and beyond. So I know that one didn't make your cut. But my comments, I hope they're heard here today, and perhaps it's not for this year or next, but that's a road that I really do think if it had one and you built it, then the cyclists would come and the people walking. People walk along it too. Plus the fact that it's so dark, it's not lit at night. So it's just a very, very, very dangerous road. So those are my comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephen. So I do want to bring this back and help staff along, and I'm sure they've taken notes on some of the specific one-off areas and they can digest that as a group. But we've touched on a lot of points here. There is you are right, Stephen, that there's a cross-section that we've seen at council for the VMP redo, and it does include the full spectrum side to side. So it is good news. I take your point about the Latoria Road maybe being fairly quickly accomplished, but again, council is literally talking about what Latoria Road is going to look like from the roundabout down to Royal Bay, and with some decisions needing to be made on sort of the width of the roadway, which will directly affect the bike lane. So again, it's simple, but it might not be completely simple. Yeah, so a lot of stuff there, but I do want to bring this back and help staff. Some of the notes I made here was based on some of the comments was to prioritize areas around and in between schools for bike lane upgrades. I've left it open-ended whether it's, I don't want to lock us into completely buffered because one street might require just paint and the next street might require pickets and then the next street might be the full blown separated or buffered bike lane. So chew on that for a second. I will look for a motion from somebody just to frame this. And over to you, Mr. Stewart.
So I just had two questions that I'm just wondering is lighting ever considered in any of the bike lanes?
In terms of the matrix for deciding on the conversion of protected bike lanes, that's a great point. It was not something that was considered, and definitely something that we can implement.
I know Machosen Road is quite dark at some places right now, and that's what concerns me. If it's going to be or when the choice is made as to where people are going, I think that would be something to consider. Is just some of it being lit a little bit more, so it's easier for people to be seen. And the other question I had is there still a Safe Schools committee that operates with the Souk School District that you get any input from or work with?
Through the chair, thanks for that question. Yes, we are working with a group with the CRD and the school districts to look at specific schools and defining safe routes for schools and specific upgrades that could help the safety of children going to and from school. So there was several schools over the last couple of years that had specific treatments, and we can certainly bring back those plans if the committee would like to see those. We are, as I said, integrating that work with our capital planning as well.
So how are you, is there a budget that you have for Safe Schools, or is it just meeting time? Or
there is a budget that's I have to go back to get the details, but Colwood did support an initiative, as I said, that was coordinated through the Capital Regional District. I don't believe there's specific money is necessary for 2024. We accomplished a lot over the last couple of years with that group and the existing schools. And as I said, that feedback went into our capital plans, most significantly the 15-year capital plan that's within the Active Transportation Network plan. The work that was done on Painter was an example of once again supporting feedback we received from the schools. And I also just wanted to touch on Member Doyle mentioned crashes and near misses and the need for the city to track those as well. You may recall the presentation from bikemaps.org, the organization based at UVic that's trying to encourage municipalities to use citizen-based reporting. So we're looking at doing that as well as sharing it with the community and promoting it through our channels. So if people have a near miss on a bike, they can put it on the bikemap.org system and we can use that information.
yeah, I'm just wondering, okay, just following this Safe Schools is so you've with the PAC and the school endorsement for Painter Road and on Dunsmuir, was there any publicity that the school did that you know of that promoted that Painter Road development that went out to parents and yeah, and it should be championed for this Colwood because it's you're moving in the right direction. This is the showcase. This is the we'd like to do this more often, and let's try and work together and share the load with the money that's available or whatever it happens to be. Because I think that makes a huge difference. Plus, and also stories in the newspaper, whatever it happens to be about what's happening, and when you do a big project like that, because it will get the community on our side a lot more to promote this sort of thing. Yeah, so I'm curious about that myself. And I know a couple of committee members here. We've talked a little bit about how to get other people involved in creating these bike lanes and safe routes. So.
Yeah, I can't speak to the specifics of the Dunsmuir Painter project. I don't maybe a question for Tyler. I can say that with respect to the Safe Routes to School projects that are working with individual schools, they did do a lot of communications with the PAC and directly to parents. That was really the meat and potatoes of the information that we got back, was from actual parents that took an interest. And largely those promotions were going, as I said, direct to the schools, and they're working with their email lists, as opposed to us promoting it more broadly via our website or newsletter. We are looking, we've spoken with representatives of Capital Bike and other groups in the region to try to look for opportunities to promote our mode shift priorities and increase the consciousness within the community of the need to improve safety on our roads. Once again, that was another reason why we invited the group from UVic to come and present on they've got 2 mapping exercises right now trying to improve road safety. So.
Thank you. So I do want to start thinking about getting to a conclusion here. If we can all chew on that for a second. Thank you, Colin. Fat fingers.
Thank you. Just some final comments on some things to keep in mind and whatnot. As we build like these, finally, like the protected bike lanes going along these routes between schools and whatnot, it's often a forgotten and missing link with the intersections, because we build these nice protected things, and then at the intersection they're just dumped at this huge like highway or road, and we've got these huge distances of crossing. There's no zebra crosswalks anymore. There's no pedestrian islands. There's no continuous crosswalks where available or where necessary. So it just seems like when you're moving forward in these designs and whatnot, keep that into consideration, that like when there's a crosswalk needed, you make sure it's very visible. This is a place for people crossing, like kids and whatnot, and not a place for cars to feel like they are dominant in those areas. Because often in a lot of areas of Colwood, we build these really nice infrastructure, and then at the intersection is completely forgotten about. And that's a huge safety concern and consideration when people are thinking about using this stuff, because in those areas where it's most dangerous is often where the infrastructure is most lacking. So just keep that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin. So I've heard a lot here tonight, some good stuff. Would you like us to speak to each one of these on your prioritized list, or have you heard enough from us? Do you want something concrete?
I've certainly heard a lot and taken a lot of notes throughout this, and you know, in the effort of time, I think there's quite a few objectives of there on the matrix, and if there are specific comments on those, happy to discuss. But yeah.
So let's do that, and I'll tell you what I've heard here, and we can see if at least there's agreement across the committee. I've heard that NIC Souk Road is basically the highest scoring, but you've heard the concerns of committee that there might be alternatives, or there's clearly alternatives with the Souk Road. So would it be safe to say that we table that for the time being from this matrix? Yeah, so that is Souk Road, I can tell you, is for a full-blown cross section. So that's up in the air as we speak, and it's going to look dramatically different in this next decade. So there's a lot of work being done behind the scenes on Souk Road. Have I gone a bridge too far on that? Someone speak up if I've gone too far, but I've heard that. I've also heard that some of the areas around the Sangster School are concerned, but you heard some of the other concerns about how does that fit with the Machosen corridor. So that sounds like a priority if we can put a Band-Aid on that for a few years and make it fit with what's coming, at least as much as possible. I've heard that Latoria Road might be a quick win that we could accomplish. Anything else? Okay, I drafted a bit of a statement here, just a philosophical motion to prioritize areas around and in between schools for bike lane upgrades. Again, some feedback from committee. Would someone like to champion that, so I'm not making my own motion here? Perfect. That's from Mr. Lacey. Do you have that, Amanda or Tiffany? Is that perfect? Thank you. How about, is anyone opposed to that motion from Mr. Lacy? You're opposed, sorry. Hang on a second, I'll fire you up there. Go ahead.
I'm not like fully opposed, but there's something in addition that should be added to that.
Go ahead, offer an amendment. Thank you.
An amendment would be when you're also doing the lanes, also make sure intersections that are along that could be possibly
Okay.
upgraded with that.
So, Mr. Lacy, do you accept that as a friendly amendment? Thank you. Amanda, that's so if you can include the word intersections or connecting intersections between in that sentence or that motion somewhere. Thank you. And if you could just read it back to us when you're ready. Sorry to put you on the spot.
Okay. That cycling routes and connections be prioritized between and around schools for bike lanes. Is that correct? And when upgrading bike lanes, intersections be upgraded as well.
So consider the intersections or the surrounding intersections. And I believe I had bike lane upgrades, not just bike lanes, because there some of those have bike lanes already. And Mr. Bayless, yes, are we
If
too
I
far
may.
afield?
No. If I may, I just thought I heard something about that things will be included, and I just would encourage the consideration be made or things like that relative to intersections. It's things we already look at. I think it's important to note. This is infill work on projects that are 4 or 5 years old with an active transportation plan. Like it's layer on layer on layer in a well-established city. So I think to your point earlier, we don't necessarily need firm recommendations going through to council. I think we've all heard a lot tonight, but if there's consensus and it's clear and you feel comfortable as a group, giving some recommendations to council, we're also fine with that, obviously. But we're quite comfortable with what's been shared tonight. I think there's great food for thought. Like you've mentioned about the intersections, making sure we take that into consideration.
Perfect.
Recognizing the nature of this project, although engineering has a larger capital plan and the rest, and Ian touched on it before with our active transportation network plan in draft mode, all the rest there. It's complex. There's a lot to it, but I think in this program, it has limitations, but it's not lost on us that as we approach an intersection, we need to make that consideration. So
Thank you. So our motion doesn't restrict you in any way. You're happy with that, or?
maybe I'll listen to it again myself. Yeah.
I think I shortened it now.
Yeah.
That cycling routes and connections be prioritized between and around schools for bike lane and intersection upgrades.
It's concise. I see a bemused look. Does that in any way hamper what we're trying to achieve, or?
I don't think so. It's the intersection piece that's making me.
Okay. I see.
Sorry, one more voice.
Yeah, go ahead. Thank you, Mr. Earl.
Good evening, committee. Robert Earl, Chief Administrative Officer. So we've absolutely heard the comment about intersections that will be incorporated into our thinking broadly, as well as the treatments with crosswalks as we move across will be part of our thinking moving forward. This particular project this evening is about the conversion of protected lanes, buffer lanes to protected lanes. And so we have a limited budget to do that. Should we spend some of that budget on simultaneously improving an intersection, it would substantively foreshorten the amount of lane change that we could do. And so it will be helpful for us to understand, assuming we're spending 100% of this money on converting existing buffered to protected, where would you like it spent?
Thank you. So what I'm hearing is we run into some fiscal challenges by including the intersection upgrades, but I'm also hearing that staff are very much live to those connections and intersections. So I take the point that this is specific to, these dollars are specific to the bike lane upgrades. Okay, I see a lineup here. Go ahead, Mr. Lacy. Motion still before us here, so.
Thanks, Mr. Earl, for that clarification. Yeah, I'm in agreement. I mean, I think we're looking too far ahead here. We're not looking at future cross sections and the entire network and right of way of Machosen and Souk. This is just simply converting buffered to curb plunked protected. So, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Lacy. And Stephen, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just, I guess, second that. One of the things that I've heard tonight is that, you know, should we do something with this limited budget in the context of just simply curb plunking them? And what interacts with that sometimes is 5-year in the future, 10-year in the future plans. Okay, so I'm going to assume that when we say something's 5 years from now, it'll be 10. So in that context, if we're looking for a specific one, I thought the ones about near Machosen School, or sorry, Sangster School, near the turn there that goes down by Royal Bay, that seems to be the highest priority in terms of saving, well, improving safety. I'm not going to say saving lives, improving safety. So that would be one that I would say, if you're looking for a priority, I would say on that one. And that's because anything else, yeah, we're right. We're going to do something that's, if it's good for 2 years, good. It's good for 2 years. Sounds fine to me. So that'll be my comment on that.
Thank you. So I do want to at least commit to a philosophical motion like as presented. I understand the concerns about the language with some of the intersections, but I do believe it's important that we at least register what it is we're trying to achieve as a group here, and a general statement around upgrades around schools I don't think is too far afield. Go ahead, Angus.
Yeah, and I think that fellow committee members are saying that we're all saying the same thing. We realize that there's a limited budget. There's only so much money to go around. But I think that it is really important that if we're going to create these paths in the community, that they lead somewhere to get safely across a road. And I just think of right now where Wishart Road, there's a light that's already in there. Is that light the safest kind of intersection that people can get across the road to get to the other side of the huge big subdivision that's all down Wishart towards Colwood Elementary? I think that's what Colin's trying to get to, is if we're going to build that, and that's a major route because of there's already schools on that, and all those elementary school kids go to Dunsmuir, and all those Dunsmuir kids go to Royal Bay. So they're all traveling that one area. Is that intersection, could we say that intersection is a priority to make it as safe as possible with lights and with you know, long enough time for bikers and walkers to get across the road and that sort of thing. So I do agree with Colin. It really needs to be make sure that you can get a safe route across the road at one or two of the major intersections. I'm not sure how I haven't spent much time at the roundabout because it's so new, but I'm not sure if you put a lot of effort into Latoria and put bike lanes there, can they get around the roundabout? That's my only concern. I'm sure they can. I'm sure they can, but that will be as Latoria gets bigger, it's going to have to be more a priority for sure. Thank you very much for your time.
So I do want to get to a conclusion here. Thank you, Colin. Go ahead. Jeez. Sorry.
Yes, there is huge budget constraints and whatnot for doing projects, but my main concern with the intersections is we build all this wonderful infrastructure, encourage mass ridership, and then some of the most dangerous areas for the routes end up being the intersections. And then if there's no consideration or safety being made part of the project, then when will it be added? And are we going to create possible or accidents or conflicts when we're leading all these new riders using the infrastructure to intersections that aren't protected or have those safety considerations? So to like try to do those later, it just seems like you're just adding more like risked and things like that to it. So I understand that budget constraints and whatnot, but like intersections can't really be forgotten because they are some of the most dangerous areas along these routes.
Through the chair. Certainly not forgotten. Appreciate the comments. Separate capital budget, it's intersection upgrades, analysis. We monitor those closely. So thank you.
Thank you. So Amanda, can we have that read one more time? And I am going to call the question.
That cycling routes and connections be prioritized between and around schools for bike lane upgrades.
And Did we, was there not another bit about the, did we remove the bit about the intersection, sorry, the
I
intersection?
removed the bit about the intersections. Is
Based
that what you
on
would like?
Mr. Lacy's amendment. Tyler, why don't you go ahead and step forward? Is the committee comfortable with that? I think we've heard from staff that these intersections are not lost in the planning, but that this specific discussion is about improving bike lanes. Are we comfortable with that? And we're comfortable with everything we've heard? I would like to call the question. Tyler, any final thoughts? Sorry.
No, not
We're
at
good.
all. And
Thank
that
you.
summarizes it perfectly, just that the intersections are not forgotten. We are this year going through a transportation master plan update, and that is a separate item, separate budget, as Josh mentioned.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I would like to call the question. Let's go with all those in favor of the motion as presented. Thank you. And that is Angus. Are you opposed to that then?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. So Mr. Stewart's opposed. Thank you, Amanda. And I believe, is that it on the agenda? Back to the right page here. Okay. Thank you so much. Looking for an adjournment, or do you have something else you want to bring up?
Short question.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, this is a question for our committee. I don't know what the regulations rulings are on this, but I believe we've had 3, maybe 4 meetings now, and we've been short the same member over and over again. So I wonder whether that means that we are in a position by whatever governs these committees to ask to have another member added to this committee.
Thank you. Any thoughts on that, Amanda? I know it has come up. We're short
Yes.
a couple of spots on some committees.
Yes, we've reached out several times and we will send a letter and have a deadline and bring it forward to council for council to appoint another member.
Thank you. So we are accelerating that, and this isn't the only committee where that's an issue. And I'm going to do this right. There we go.
Thank you. Question for city staff. Do you have a timeline roughly of when we would be seeing these like draft intersection designs or things along that line to our meetings?
Thank you through the chair. I don't have specific dates on those. We were just discussing back there. I do see potential value in potentially having another recommendation to council relative to intersection advancement of evaluation if committee so see fit. I think that could be a separate topic. Bring that up to council. Something we could put money towards to looking at those. I think you brought up 2 or 3 specific ones, so we could look at advancing that outside of our master planning.
Okay, so can
Exercise
we
for
expect
transportation.
something to come back to committee with some of these key intersections that have been discussed at some point?
I think the recommendation would come from committee to council to get staff to do that work.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Colin, hit your button again there. And specifically what it is that you're asking for and how can we move this along?
Like design considerations or like
For a specific one or all of them, or what are you thinking?
ones that are along like routes like the main artery roads
Okay.
and collector roads, like these major intersections where they get a lot of use, like specifically like along Latoria, Chosen, Souk, etc. A lot of the lanes just dump right on the road there, and to have like some consideration for like the future master plan draft and whatnot to include intersection designs, because there's a lot of cross sections for the roadways, but not any design considerations for the actual intersections.
Okay, so when you say a lot of use, you mean cycling, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And I do believe a lot of this cross section and this stuff will come with the new master transportation plan that is soon upon us. Go ahead, Mr. Earl. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Jensen. Given what administration has heard from committee this evening, we believe it would be beneficial for committee to recommend to council that staff be directed, as an example, to return to committee with a prioritized list of intersection improvements where cycling and pedestrian movements would be improved. Currently, we don't have that. We have prioritized lists of pedestrian improvements. We have prioritized lists of cycling improvements. We have master planning work that's underway that looks community-wide, but we don't have specific project lists that would improve the intersections relative to cycling or pedestrian movements. It sounds like that's super important to this committee. I think that would be helpful for administration to have that direction from council. We don't currently have it. We're not currently working on it.
Thank you. Is that something you would like to champion?
Yes, that
Colin?
would be, and I believe last committee I put through, I think it was like a motion with this group to do that, but if this is something that's not been put through, then perhaps we need to be doing that again.
Sorry, I don't recall. Amanda, so that motion put forward by Mr. Sparks as presented by the chief administrator, do you have that? Does everybody have that? Do we need it read back? Are we good? Okay, I'll call that motion.
Could I just have it?
Okay, go ahead,
read back,
Amanda.
clarification?
I hope I got it all. That staff return to the committee with a prioritized list of projects of intersection improvements that are for cycling and pedestrian movement. Is that correct?
Should the word safety be included in that?
I think
Those are the lenses we're gonna put on it. Thank you. Perfect. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Perfect, that's unanimous. Thank you so much. Anything else? Looking for a motion to adjourn? Thank you, Mr. Lacy. Anyone opposed? Thank you, and we'll call that adjourned. Thank you so much.